We must begin with a clear and solemn oath. This is an attempt to distinguish and remove the romantic myth that has clung like Spanish moss to the systems of chattel slavery and sharecropping. We do not tell this tale to wallow in the horror, but to face it, to truly understand the history of this southern ground beneath our feet. For how else can we celebrate the fierce, indomitable achievements of the oppressed under the heel of an oppressive system? How else can we learn the sacred geometry of systematic oppression itself, so that we may recognize and prevent its reemergence, no matter what new guise it wears? The difference between chattel slavery and sharecropping in the Southeast, though separated by the thunderous bell of emancipation, is not just a matter of dates. It is a profound schism in the very nature of bondage, one that defines a human being as property, the other as a debt. In the antebellum South, the enslaved person was by law defined as chattel, a piece of personal property, no different from a plow or a chifferobe. It was a system that decreed a soul had no legal rights, no claim to its own labor, and no ownership of its own children. The child of an enslaved mother, like the fruit of the vine, belonged to the master. The human being could be sold, transferred, or traded like any other commodity, often at the drop of a hat, severing family ties like a clean, cruel stroke of an axe. The ownership was total. They toiled under the gang labor system, driven by the whip of the overseer, with the sole incentive being the avoidance of punishment. Their entire sustenance, the coarse food, the rough clothes, the bare-bones cabin in the slave quarters, was given not as pay, but as the owner's legal responsibility to maintain his investment. After the war, the sharecropper was, on the page, a legally free individual and a citizen. They signed a contract and theoretically had the right to leave. But, my dear, in the South, the law is often a ghost of what is enforced. The promise of freedom was there, shining and sharp. But they had no mule, no seed, no land, nothing but their naked hands and the cotton dirt. This system was an exquisite trap of economic exploitation. The family rented the land, the tools, the seed, and the housing, and for all this they paid the landowner a large share of the crop, typically half. The true venom lay in the credit system. Lacking capital, they were forced to buy their supplies on credit, a crop lien, from the land-owned store, the commissary, at usurious interest rates. When the harvest was in, the debt was deducted. Unscrupulous bookkeeping and the caprice of the harvest ensured one thing: perpetual debt. This was the new shackle. They were legally free, but bound to the land by an unpaid balance, an arrangement chillingly termed peonage, or slavery by another name. Laws even made it illegal to leave if they owed a debt. The great difference lies in the degree of autonomy the oppressed could salvage for themselves, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be wholly extinguished. For the former slave, sharecropping allowed a sliver of crucial, life-affirming control that slavery utterly denied. They could drag their cabins away from the old centralized slave quarters and closer to their own fields, a small, potent act of independence. The direct, daily supervision of the white overseer was gone. The family unit became the organizer of labor, giving them agency over their hours and work methods. Critically, black women and children could often reduce their brutal field labor, allowing the mother to focus more on home and family, beginning the slow, painful process of rebuilding what slavery had tried to annihilate. Yet while the economic structure of sharecropping impoverished both white and black laborers through the debt-inducing crop lien system, their overall experience was drastically different. White sharecroppers were exploited by class. Black sharecroppers were exploited by both class and race under the brutal codification of Jim Crow. The white poor, though desperate, were protected from the worst racial terrorism and had legal recourse. They could vote, serve on juries, and appeal to a white-controlled court system. Their upward mobility, though difficult, was possible. They had a demonstrably better chance to move up the agricultural ladder to the more favorable position of a tenant farmer and eventually to landowner. The black sharecropper, conversely, was systematically stripped of legal and political rights, facing the constant, existential threat of lynching and the violent enforcement of the racial hierarchy. They were effectively trapped in an economic prison fortified by the walls of Jim Crow. Statistically, the disparity is stark. A far higher percentage of black farmers remained trapped in the system than their white counterparts. The popular culture that springs from this birth, the novels and the films, loves to tell a lie. The lie of the plantation myth and the noble poor to soften the moral stain of this history. The romanticizing of chattel slavery, promoted by the Lost Cause movement, created the moonlight and magnolias trope. They depicted the antebellum South as a golden age of aristocratic grace, and the plantation house became its shining symbol. They gave us the happy slave stereotype, the loyal, childlike figure content under the benevolent master's care. This narrative was never about history. It was a lie to justify the evil and to pacify the white conscience, divorcing the aesthetic beauty of the setting from the blood and unpaid toil that financed it. Even anti-slavery works often fell into this trap, romanticizing the setting to appeal to a wider audience's nostalgia for an agrarian ideal, using the crumbling mansion as a dramatic stage for moral tragedy. They allowed the reader to condemn the planter's actions without condemning the entire cultural legacy of the powerful white ruling class. Sharecropping is romanticized differently, less through glamour and more through a nostalgic lens of rugged agrarianism. The media often focuses on the resilience, the community, the simple, tough life, the noble poor, without exposing the systemic cruelty of the debt trap. It simplifies the struggle to mere class conflict, conveniently obscuring the specific, brutal role of racial oppression that made the experience for black farmers a continuation of servitude. This romanticization allows audiences to indulge in a false nostalgia for a purer, pre-industrial life, ignoring the grinding poverty, the isolation, and the grotesque violence born of economic desperation that truly defined the sharecropper's existence. The Southern Gothic genre uses these systems as its spiritual haunting. Chattel slavery is the ancestral curse, the original sin. Its trauma manifests in the decaying plantation house, the physical rot mirroring the moral rot of the white planter class. The sin is a family secret that drives descendants to madness and despair. It is the literal and figurative ghost that haunts the big house, asserting that the past is never dead. Sharecropping is the present trauma, the moral decay of the post-Reconstruction South. The setting shifts from the majestic ruined manor to the dilapidated shack and the desolate field. The Gothic element is not the supernatural ghost, but the grotesque mundane, the isolation, the raw violence, the religious fanaticism, all born from economic entrapment and the deprivation of dignity. It is the horror of knowing that freedom was promised but relentlessly withheld. The struggle of the sharecropper is the very soul of the genre that speaks of poverty, hardship, and the deep love of the land in country music, where the debt bondage of the cropland system became the archetype of the hard life, the reason for the rambling and escaping themes that celebrated the highway and the railroad as the only true paths to independence. We see that both chattel slavery and sharecropping, those separated by law, were united by the goal of absolute control and extraction of wealth from the labor of a subordinate class. Chattel was based on the absolute ownership of the body, sharecropping on the absolute ownership of the debt.